So I'm going to get started on our year 3 project. So this is a collaborative project with Morley from Michigan and Yiheng from Purdue. So what we try to do in this project is essentially try to leverage the cellular V2X, vehicle-to-everything communication channel, to understand the performance and also try to address cybersecurity challenges. And one of the kind of new features, CV2X also allow us to share essentially sensor information. So this is what is the project. So here's just a quick outline what we're going to talk about. We're going to start with what the goal of the project, essentially have 3 components. Then I'm going to talk about a system we're building called the cross-layer monitoring system for CV2X performance evaluation, but also for cybersecurity monitoring. And Morley going to talk about the Scorpion project. She has worked on collaborative perception model. And Yiheng going to talk about the sensor sharing using traffic signal. Right. So anyway, so there's this thing's supposed to show up the last. So why we kind of care about V2X, right? So V2X itself actually is a kind of much more broader term, including vehicle-to-vehicle communication, vehicle-to-infrastructure communication, and vehicle-to-pedestrian, and also could include the vehicle-to-network, right? So that basically means leverage 4G, 5G for basically sending some of the information, and also vehicle-to-cloud, etc. So cellular V2X, also known as LT V2X, was basically a newer standard that replaced the older one called the DSRC, the Dedicated Short-Range Communication Protocol, which have been basically replaced. And CV2X is defined by 3GPP standard, has multimodal. I'm going to give you quickly kind of later primer on the CV2X. So basically the whole idea is to enable kind of time-critical message exchange between vehicles or vehicle to infrastructures, and follow basically the similar standard as 4G, 5G, where, for example, traditional IEEE DSRC is actually based on some of the Wi-Fi standard. So the US DOT actually in 2023, I think, 2024, issued the want to kind of accelerate CV2X deployment in fall 2024. Several kind of deployment testbed has been built, including Ann Arbor, building an Ann Arbor connected environment. And in the morning, we heard from the outs in the US DOT, even though the plan was drafted in the previous administration, this administration is still interested in kind of push the implementation, right? So the goal of this project, we actually want to develop a kind of measurement platform so we can actually measure the performance of CV2X in real world, because it's a time-critical, safety-critical kind of communication. We want to say, hey, it's actually performed well. And other parties also try to address what are the potential cybersecurity problems. For example, in previous talk, people can talk about one attack could be actually sending, can inject falsified data or fake data, right, to kind of disrupt the autonomous vehicles. And also, as I just mentioned, the CV2X also allow you to do the sensor sharing. So we're also looking at the new data fusion strategy. When you have information from multiple cars, how could you actually enhance the perception? And also, one other party say, hey, if we want the CV2X of vehicle has to be misbehavior, how could I actually detect that kind of in time to prevent any damage to the system, to the transportation. So we're gonna split the talk among 3 of us. I'm probably just having 5 minutes or less to finish up. So I'm gonna quickly talk about the project we are working on, developing a cross-layer monitoring system for CV2X performance evaluation and also cybersecurity and safety, right? So here's basically kind of very high level overview what CV2X is. Actually start from bottom. You have a so-called communication layer, then you have a traditional IP transportation, the transport layer, then you have application layer, actually defined by different standards. Bodies, for example, the lower layer is by 3GPP, the middle layer by IEEE, And the top layer is basically the, the SAE, which define all this application layer kind of message, for example, basic safety message, etc. So in terms of CV2X, it has basically so-called mode 3, mode 4. Mode 4 is the peer-to-peer mode, so vehicle can actually decide when to transmit data. In the mode 3 is actually based on base station going to decide which vehicle can transmit data, etc. So what's being implemented actually in the today mostly mode 4, because the cellular network dragging their feet, they are not implementing that features, right? So the key kind of insight is that the CV2X channel actually just using a relatively small 20 megahertz channel. So that's actually not really a wideband channel. For example, 5G network today, in the similar spectrum, you actually have 100 megahertz channels, right? So it's a relatively narrow channel, and it's a broadcasting nature. Basically, you send a message, everyone can hear it, right? So which is a good thing, because you want to say, hey, there's a danger, you want everyone to hear it, but also means that anyone else can send a message, you can disrupt your messages also, right? So this is the kind of critical part. And this is kind of just show you the basic diagram. There's actually two implementation mode. In this diagram here, the red one is actually so-called control message. Each vehicle will say, hey, I have something to transmit. In the European kind of standard, they're actually putting all the control messages at the beginning, so-called a slot. The time virtually divided into different slots, so you only transmit a big slot. So if your vehicle has something to transmit in the European kind of operation mode, everyone just sending control message in the beginning, say, hey, I have some message, and then some resource blocking later say, hey, this is my message. In the American adopted the operation mode is every message in the beginning is controlled, then right following is what the message you want to transmit, right? So basically means that your device had to keep listening to say, hey, the control message, so say, hey, there's someone else to transmit and decode the message. Right? So that's kind of make the implementing a decoding standard become a little bit harder. So since it's a peer-to-peer mode, everyone had to have the same concept, when's the beginning of slot, when's the end of slot, etc. So how you achieve that, you basically do time synchronization, everyone using GPS or GNS in general to synchronize. Our clock is synchronized, so we know what's the beginning of the slot, so you're sending data only during that slot. Right? So that's basically what the system, and the system itself have some kind of built-in congestion, because so the system is going to listen to the channel. If the channel too busy, if you don't have important message to transmit, you're actually going to wait. People who have more important messages say, hey, I'm about to collide with someone, I'm actually right now breaking, this is a high priority data, right? So you can see because of broadcast nature, right? So ideally you want higher priority data to transmit first, so that you can avoid collision, but no one actually regulates why your message is a high priority, et cetera, right? So those are the problems we had to kind of address. The standard itself in the control message, you can specify, you have a priority to say, hey, you can set priorities. This message has higher priority versus other. SAE actually defines some kind of standard to say, hey, what type of messages should be have priority 2, 3, et cetera. Right? So there's a standard, and require basically the vendor to implement those things. But all the message priorities set at the application layer. Say, hey, I have more important message. That's how you tell the network. Right? So you can see the potential someone could actually abuse the system. Right? So that's kind of partially the reason we actually want to building a monitoring system to say, hey, if I can listen to all the message, we can decide if someone's lying because it said it has high priority data, but in fact actually doesn't really have high priority data. We want to be able to detect such a system, right? So in particular, because it have limited bandwidth, right? So we want to make sure that only devices or vehicle has a very important message to transmit instead of just anyone blast, right? So this is the problem we try to address, right? So because of, as I just mentioned, malicious attackers or someone who compromised a vehicle decided to kind of blast all the messages because they can compromise a vehicle or the so-called onboard unit to transmit. So US DOT has defined a standard called the Security Credential Management System, SCMS in short, which basically require all the devices running like OBU, RSU, roadside unit. When you operate in the US, you have to register through the SCMS, you're getting a credential security, all the message you transmit going to sign by that security. So this provide a way to building trust, but it doesn't prevent someone, for example, I have a device that's already registered, has signed messages, but someone can still compromise and use that to abuse the channel, etc. So SCMS has defined some misbehavior detection module. So how you actually do that is not well defined. That's one part. The second part, this mechanism itself is operated at a much slower time scale. You rely on people reporting. The way how I can prevent you to transmit is basically has so-called revocation list. You send and say, hey, this pseudo ID is no longer valid because it belongs to some bad guy. If you hear this message from this bad guy, ignore it. But that's a much slower time scale. So we want to design system. Why can we just use an existing OBU as the monitoring device? That's because this OBU is a closed box. On system building commercial box, we can't really have access to the lower layer information. In particular, we want to see, for example, all the control messages so we can see how many people actually transmit, etc. The OBU only give you what decoded upper layer, high layer, application layer messages, right? So which is not sufficient. So anyway, so this is just to kind of show you what we envision system can be built. This is actually my student using ChatGPT generate the image, which is, so essentially the idea if we monitor, say, hey, someone, you have a vehicle may have the OBU kind of has a malfunction, started kind of just sending message all the time, even though it's not supposed to do. Just like we know that vehicle, today we sometimes having kind of problem with your car device that problem. So our system can then monitor, say, hey, this vehicle transmitting data all the time, even though it doesn't have the need to transmit, so we can potentially identify that message, that vehicle maybe either, for example, let the law enforcement know, hey, there's a, just like when you have a tail light has problem, a cop can stop you, give you a warning so you can go fix it, right? So same thing with the communication device, you go fix your communication device, or maybe just give you a friendly email to say, hey, you need to do that, right? So that's for the one case. Then you also have potentially have a malicious case, right? People can inject the false messages, etc. So we need to kind of quickly identify such devices, then try to stop such devices. Or you may have external devices. For example, you may have a drone flying over a city, then try to jam the channel, right? So our devices can say, hey, suddenly the channel completely getting jammed, so we say what's going on. So the idea is we want to combine the communication with also other sensors, for example, the roadside kind of camera, etc. You can actually correlate with the vision to say, hey, there's something going on here. So that's kind of our vision, how we want to solve. And the overall system, this is the building block. I'm not going to go to details. Right? So the part consists of three components. One is basically do decoding, listen to the raw kind of signals, decode the messages. Once we decode the messages, since it's a broadcast, we can hear everyone's conversation. And the second part, then we basically building an analyzer to say, hey, what are the statistics, for example, how busy the channel is, what the channel condition, etc. We can use that information to help us, is there anomaly or not, right? So the last part is we also building a system to correlate with the exam camera and other information. You combine what you hear in the channel versus what you see in the physical, right? So we talk about physical AI, physical world. You can correlate and make this detection, for example, detect misbehaviors, right? So this is a kind of system block diagram, how we design decoder. I'm not going to talk to the details. And another is the analyzer. We're building kind of different type of statistic analyzer. For example, having some kind of score to say, hey, this vehicle generate message, is that the kind of abnormal or normal, etc. Right? So then lastly, just fit into a correlator. If we want to identify which vehicle that is, then we can correlate with the perception. So this part has not been built yet. So I'm gonna just conclude here. I mean, finish here. Let Morley, you want to come up to your.
Yeah, thanks, Zhi-Li. So I'm going to talk about a system that we have designed. So essentially, the key idea is that when you have data sharing for sensing, the challenge is that there are actually communication loss or inaccuracy of sensing data due to the fact that there's localization and synchronization error. So how do we leverage that insights, right, to design that kind of robustness into the machine learning algorithm? So just to start with the background, the reason why we are looking at sensor data sharing is for collaborative perception. So here are two scenarios where in the top scenario, vehicle 1 has experienced occluded objects, right? So you cannot see this object, this car. You see, this doesn't work. Anyway, so let me see if I can use. Yeah. So you cannot. So there is this occluded object, and vehicle 1 cannot see it, but vehicle 2 can share that information with vehicle 1. And similarly, vehicle 1 has limited sensing range, and vehicle 2 can see this vehicle that's right in front of it, and so it can more safely do lane change. So there are scenarios where sharing sensing data is helpful for improving safety in these driving conditions. So, so there are a lot of challenges with sharing sensing data because the data is collected on different vehicles. By the time they arrive at the vehicles that want to consume the data, there's like delay, and those delays, and there are also communication loss, right? V2X communication is not guaranteed reliable delivery. And the sensing hardware also makes mistakes. So there are these sensing errors. So all these challenges, as illustrated here, you can see that starting with the normal condition, and then as you have more and more spatial misalignment towards left, the ground truth green box deviates further from the prediction. The prediction deviates further from the ground truth, right? As you increase spatial misalignment as well as temporal misalignment. And in reality, you have both types of misalignment happening all at the same time. So how do we design the machine learning algorithm when we combine the data together and still be able to recover effectively? So here's another illustration of the same problem. So we look at, particularly as the network loss rate increases, as you can see the average precision. This is like a measure of object detection, perception performance. As you can see, it increases, right? The accuracy of detecting object basically drops as the loss rate increases. So this is a clear phenomenon, and we evaluated across known algorithms. So, so given this challenge, we looked at the related work. It turns out none of these previous work addressed both all these three challenges across the board: sensing errors, sensor synchronization issues, and lossy network, right? So we're thinking about, given all these challenges we know, how do we design like the network lossy challenges into having the AI algorithm be aware of that lossy network conditions along with the sensing limitations. So that's the key motivation for this work. In the end, we came up with this solution framework, and we actually evaluated using realistic settings and also ensure that the system is performant in terms of can address the real-time challenges. Due to the time constraints, I won't go into details, but at the high level, we have these three components. That is addressing the lossy network issue, spatial misalignment, and the temporal misalignment challenge, right? This is actually not really very novel in the sense that we are actually applying known algorithms in computer vision. You are probably expert in that, to integrate it into this framework, so that way we can address the challenge. Here's another illustration of this. We have this deformable spatial cross-attention, and then temporal alignment, and finally this lost BEV feature reconstruction framework. So I want to give Yiheng some time before we run out of time. So I won't go into details. And this paper was published in IROS 2025, and the work is also available online. And so we looked at, the performance. As you can see, Scorpion illustrated in the blue curve. We, as you can see, across the board, right, based on the network loss performance, we do have significant enhancement compared to the previous approaches to do the sensor data fusion. Okay, so this is another illustration looking at the localization errors and synchronization error. The blue curve consistently outperforms previous work. So in summary, we actually focused on 3 practical challenges with respect to localization errors and synchronization issues, as well as the lossy behavior due to the wireless network communication, right? So when you share data across vehicles for collaborative perception, those 3 challenges are fundamental challenges. So we are designing the robustness into the machine learning algorithms to be aware of these underlying lossy network conditions, as well as the sensor limitations, and design this solution that can address those challenges. In practice, that we found that our solution is actually fairly lightweight. It's not computationally expensive and can meet the real-time challenges of collaborative perception for real-time perception. Also, with that, I'd like to hand off to Yiheng. Sorry about.
Since we're actually already out of time, so I will very quickly go through what we have done. So as Zhi-Li was working on the communication level, and Morley was working on the perception level. So which we are working on is on the application level, a sensor data sharing based application as traffic signal control. So the idea is simple, that CVs detect surrounding vehicles and send the SDSM to the infrastructure, and the traffic signal control system utilize these SDSMs to make the control decisions. So the threat model in this case is we call SDSM spoofing. Basically, we assume that one CVs on the road or multiple CVs on the road can be malicious and send the falsified SDSMs, and then these falsified SDSMs are mixed with these benign ones, and all as the input to the traffic signal controller to make and lead the controller to make suboptimal or make wrong decisions. So in order to launch this attack, actually I will skip some of the details here. We built a very complicated attack pipeline, assuming this is a black box attack model, so we need to train a certain model to represent the original traffic signal controllers neural network. We also need to integrate some traffic flow model to predict the future state for the attackers. We also train some like deep reinforced learning agent as attackers to find out the optimal attack strategy. And finally, an optimization-based model to generate vehicle trajectories and to generate the final SDSMs as an input, falsified input to the system. And then in terms of defense, we actually built this preliminary defense model. This is basically a consensus-based model. The general idea is that, for example, if one detection in one SDSM is supposed to be this vehicle is supposed to be detected by multiple vehicles, but the actual reported detection is not consistent with the its theoretical number, then this is considered as a kind of indication of anomaly. Then we just use a simple majority voting to find out which SDSMs are normal and which SDSM are malicious. Just this last slide is the performance comparison. So the blue curves, the green curves are the ones, the traffic signal controller performance in the benign environment. Basically, there were no attack, and the red ones are under this SDSM spoofing attack. You can see the huge increase of the average travel time, like more than 300% or even 400%. And then the blue curves are after applying this anomaly detection or this misbehavior detection model, where you can see actually with the increase of the CV penetration rate, the detect result works better and better, right? This is mainly because that the majority vote is more effective on the higher penetration rates. Okay, and several next steps, including to integrate more realistic detection models like what Morley was presenting, and also to improve the performance under the low penetration rate for the misdetection behavior. Okay, so I think I'll just skip the conclusion remarks, and if you have any questions, you can contact us, and thank you. Sorry, Neil.